Hey everyone, it's Keith. Thanks for joining us today. Hey, I'm excited about today's conversation. This is the last conversation on cloud optimization, and we're going to be focused on getting into the real tactics of the how-tos, talking about things like culture, cost, management of cloud optimization to help you guys really think strongly about things you can do in your organization to make cloud more optimal. So I'd like to introduce you to John McGivern and Parker Stevens. Let's give a listen. So with that, John, do you mind doing a quick introduction?
Sure, Keith. Thanks for having us today. We really appreciate it. My name is John McGivern. I have been in the IT industry for about 35 years. For the last 3 years, I have been partnered with my colleague Parker here doing cloud optimization. Prior to that, I was 32 years in the IT infrastructure. I was on the side where I was the one moving to the cloud or buying equipment. So this is kind of near and dear to my heart, whereas 4 years ago I was moving to the public cloud, and I certainly understand a lot of the challenges and am enjoying helping the companies that we work with to optimize their environments.
I'm Parker Stevens. I work with John, and I've been at Groupware Technology for going on 7.5 years. I started in IT doing help desk and whatnot, quickly moved into engineering, data center, and now I've been working on cloud and specifically helping companies save money in the cloud.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to our conversation. And just so we're all on the same page, what we're trying to do with these discussions is help give CIOs and IT organizations more thinking about how they can be more effective with cloud optimization. So with your permission, I'd like to go backwards a little bit. I shared with you guys the videos the interviews we did previously. And I'd like to get your comments on particularly a comment that Leandro Balbino made about the cost of cloud and how he proposes it could actually be cheaper than on-prem if you consider elasticity. Is that something that you guys, do you believe in that? And do you see that in day-to-day?
Yeah, Keith, I think it really depends on the company. And obviously for McDonald's, that seems to be the case. I think that a lot of folks look at the cloud as something that's quick and easy. It's going to be cheap right from the get-go. I think that it really needs to be looked at as a long-term investment. Obviously, McDonald's has that view. You're going into the cloud, and it's going to cost money in the beginning, but in the long run, amortizing that maybe upfront cost across a few years, 10 years even, just like you would with purchasing hardware. I think that that's the mindset that you need to have as a long-term investment. And if you're utilizing those elasticity features, auto scaling groups in the cloud, you're going to be able to scale when you need to and then scale down when you don't need to be running at full steam. If you're not using those features, you don't have a long-term mindset going into the cloud.
Yeah, and what I would add to what Parker said, Keith, is that when I look at McDonald's, it is so impressive to me that a company of that obvious size could be 90+% in the cloud already, because they're a legacy company that had to have a lot of on-prem equipment. So it's impressive. What was interesting to me in a decision that I had to make in the past, and we see this with our customers, is how do you get there? And so when my former company went there, we chose to architect our way into the cloud, okay? So from a cost standpoint, we took care of the elastic tools that Parker mentioned, and costs were relatively under control once we understood them. However, it was a long, arduous process, and it was not completed before I came over to Groupware to work on this. So it's one of those things where if I had it to do over again, I might do more of a lift and shift, get to the cloud, and then re-architect in the cloud, because it reduces that amount of time where you're in that hybrid state and you're having to run 2 or more environments. So if you do that, if you go the lift and shift route and then re-architect once you're in the cloud, you may spend more upfront. To Parker's point, Keith, I think it really has to do with If you do that and you don't view it as a long-term investment, you're going to get there and go, this is too expensive. But if you do it as, hey, we're going to get there, we're going to be solid on one platform, and then we're going to re-architect to take advantage of everything, then I think it may be more expensive up front, but in the long term, it should be less expensive than your on-prem.
Interesting. And that's consistent with, I think, something we heard from Paul Chapman. He talked a little bit about if you move to cloud, it's going to require a different, the word he used was culture. Is that, what are your thoughts on that?
We see it over and over again. And I don't like the word culture because culture brings in a lot more of the company than maybe just moving to the cloud. So my term would be mindset. And within the people in the company, you really have to have that organizational mindset change that says the cloud is different. It is, you only buy when you need it. You can innovate, but you innovate, you can shut down, you can start up. You don't carry what we would consider an on-prem mindset, okay? And so if you are able to basically get that across to your team to not view this as just operating as normal, I think to Paul's point, it makes a big difference in your success in the cloud.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. We work with a lot of different companies, and, with the newer companies who are born in the cloud, the startups, you got the younger engineers who all they know is the cloud. They know tools that don't exist on a piece of hardware that they can see. And so their mindset is very different when they're architecting and building out their apps and whatnot. But with companies who, like a lot of the companies who are talking about this, like the reason that we're having this conversation are the companies who are still kind of on-prem or that they're trying to get into the cloud. They have more often than not an on-prem mindset still. And we see it over and over again where you've got a huge organization, you've got engineers in different departments, and you're trying to manage all that. And IT has a hard time reining in, the different costs and who has access to what, who can provision what. And you have engineers who spin up what they think they need, and they're over provisioning left and right because they have the same mindset of, on-prem. Well, I bought a box that had a bigger CPU because I might need it. And if you have that mindset, you're going to overspend everywhere.
And the other thing, it was sort of sprinkled, Keith, throughout the three discussions you had with Leandro, with Paul, with Alan, which was this idea of speed and innovation. Everybody talks about the cloud. Oh, it's speed and innovation. You can get there. Well, then I might bring in the word culture more. If you're going to use the cloud for speed and innovation, it is a cultural change within the company in that your business groups, your new, quote, DevOps teams, and even your finance departments are working much closer together, because in the cloud, you can go get what you want. You can just go grab a piece of it and try things, okay? So in that way, it is different. It's not this long, arduous process to go get the hardware for Project X. Then the hardware gets installed, and then development group comes in and uses it. So in that way, it's more of a collaborative culture with the cloud where you can do speed and innovation quicker. But once again, if you're still in the old mentality, then you're not going to take advantage, or you're not going to succeed as well as if you would if the groups around the company buy into the ideas of the cloud.
That's it, because Alan Smith actually talked about that, the speed and innovation, right? And he said you got to be careful with that, because the cloud does allows you to go out and fail fast. But if you're, and he paraphrased this, if you're successful doing it, you could bankrupt the company. I mean, do you see this with your companies?
We see it all the time. With the companies that we work with, we love to get to them when they're just going into the cloud, because as I like to say, it's a lot easier to keep the toothpaste in the tube as opposed to trying putting it back into the tube after it's out. Most times we don't get them. We get them after it's like, what did we just do? We went to the cloud and things are crazy. And our our costs are outrageous. Well, what we see is that this idea of DevOps, which is a collaborative effort, usually using Scrum teams in the Agile methodology. But with DevOps comes this great creativity, but it also comes with empowerment that the whole point of this is to be able to let people to try things and to, as they say, fail fast. However, over and over again, we see companies who don't put the guardrails up in place to control it. So either through over provisioning, which Parker already mentioned, or DevOps teams not being properly managed or not sort of following best practices, we see debris laying all over the place. We see all sorts of different waste because you've empowered your teams to go out and create and innovate and fail fast, but you may not have put up the guardrails that keep the costs under control.
Yeah. And to that point, of debris being left laying around, like I used to work in a data center at Groupware, and I really like, a physical environment. I'm an organizational type of guy. So I, organize the cables, I label the bins, I organize the wire management in the racks and whatnot. And if we're not using a server, let's just shut it down. If you want to turn it back on over LAN, that's fine, it's there. But in the cloud, everything's just clicks and buttons. And so, your engineer spins up an instance that's running, whatever application for a week. And with that instance comes somewhere to store data. So they got their volume attached to it. And then they've got an IP address so that they can, locate it on the network. And then they have a backup of the whole thing. And then a week later, that engineer shuts down their instance. But because everything is disconnected in the cloud, it's not all attached to the power supply of a piece of hardware. Your snapshot of that whole system, the IP address and the volume are still left laying around unless you, manually tell AWS or GCP to get rid of them. So you shut down the instance and you got debris left laying around. We see that all the time. And, you just need to implement a couple of policies to track that kind of stuff and say, hey, here's some stuff that's, costing you $300 a week that is older than 2 weeks and unattached. And a lot of folks just don't realize that they can, create a policy or just don't have the time to do it.
And I would add to that in my personal experience, about 6 months ago, we onboarded a new customer doing about $100,000 a month in spend. And in a matter of 1 week, we found $7,000 per month of debris, of unattached resources. So we looked like heroes, but that's certainly not what we want for our customers. They literally had left $7,000 of debris laying around that they didn't know about. So we saved them 7% right off the top. However, obviously that we don't want that to happen to anyone. And it's so easy to do in the cloud.
Interesting. Well, I would definitely like to get into a little bit more about what you guys do see. And, so you have this experience, you work with 50 companies. I mean, what kind of other things do you guys see happening out there?
We sort of have the regular stuff that we see over and over, Keith. Okay. And the first I'll start with is waste. Okay. Talking about the debris. We basically, if you look at Gartner or Forrester, you can see all the studies about how much is being wasted in the cloud. We haven't found a customer yet who we couldn't save at least 10%. In most cases, for a customer who's been out there for a year or two, maybe 3 or 4, we can save them 20 to 30. And it's not because they're doing anything wrong. It's just that they might not have brought the right mentality or that we talked about before, or they might be leaving debris around. There's all sorts of that. We had one customer who, when I went in to sell them, I looked at their environment. We did a test, a demo, and a pilot. And I was like, you guys are pretty well tuned. I don't know. You may be the first customer yet that I can't save 10%. And sure enough, we dug into the data a little more, and even a really well-tuned customer, we were ultimately able to save them 10% by just finding things that were either misarchitected or left laying around that they didn't need. So the first thing you always look for is just the clear waste that happens over and over again because it's almost the nature of the cloud and how flexible it is. Talking about waste though, Keith, it does you no good unless you have the visibility to it. So in many cases, companies don't have the tools that they need. And more companies, we are seeing multi-cloud, okay? So if you're in one of the 3 or 4 major cloud providers, the Azure, the GCP, the AWS, and now even Oracle Cloud starting to make a move, right? If they don't have the right tools and the right visibility across their multiple clouds, then they can't they can't control what they need to control. We had another company that we work with who numerous times, and this is across both Azure and AWS, this company has had security issues where a disgruntled employee ran up tons of resources on a holiday weekend. They have had just the normal set of mistakes where someone put up something way over provisioned by accident. Nothing malicious. But this particular company, with the visibility, and if you have the proper tools where you can do a alerting, real-time alerting, it truly helps to get yourself under control and, more importantly, stay under control.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, about having additional tools to help you along this journey. I mean, there's lots of tools out there that give you that single pane of glass view for your multiple clouds. But even if you're just using the native tools within those cloud providers, I mean, if you look back at what the data center on-prem looks like, you didn't have an engineer looking at the cost of things. You only had the budget and you purchased hardware. But now you have this continuous concern of, am I going to drive up the cost by provisioning this stuff? And you really need to consider having someone manage the costs and the invoicing and the reconciliation of that each month, and the budgeting. And so, with our team, one of the things that we know is a struggle is having the time and the expertise in-house to do those kinds of things. And so we provide a service where we take that burden on for you. I mean, people got day jobs. They already have, a busy schedule. Engineers are busy writing, applications and whatnot. And so the last thing that they need is another, tool or another responsibility of looking at the costs. The other problem is that, managing things like reserved instances in AWS or committed use discounts in GCP can get complicated, especially when you've got multiple groups who are spinning up resources, spinning down resources that might be attached to or being utilized, by a reserved instance. You get, fees from unused RIs. You got to manage that kind of stuff. Upper management gets annoyed that we're paying additional fees, and we see it left and right that it's just complicated. The management of these reserved instances and CUDs and reserved VMs are just too much. And so we take that on, and in a lot of instances, the company just didn't have the in-house time or expertise to manage it themselves.
So John, you've mentioned visibility a number of times and about how important it is. What do you use to gain visibility for your clients?
One of the key concepts here, Keith, is multi-cloud, as I've mentioned numerous times before, and being able to see a single pane of glass. So there are numerous solid multi-cloud tools on the market. 3 years ago, we migrated towards Cloud Health, certainly an industry leader, and with a single pane of glass view. We have been very happy with it, as have our customers. What we see in a nutshell is that if a customer is of a very, very large size, they probably can put the expertise around the process because it's that much spend that it's worth it. When you get into the customers that are, say, 10,000 per month to 100,000 per month, which is a lot of customers, it's hard to have. Everyone has a day job in a customer like that. And so in that case, it's hard to incur the overhead to properly manage the costs. Even if you have the visibility, you probably don't have the time and or the expertise to deal with the visibility.
And so so I understand this. So you're saying that these companies at that level of cloud spend, they assign this to someone on staff already, and they may or may not give them a tool and say, here, go take care of all this?
Yes. I mean, in a nutshell, yes. And so there are customers that we've seen that they have the tool and they do assign it, and this person is just swamped. It's not for lack of good intentions. So yeah, it's a tough situation to be in because not only do you have to learn a tool, whatever tool that might be, but you also have to learn the nuances of the individual cloud providers. And for every additional cloud provider you get to, you have to learn even more nuances. So it just compounds itself. It's a tough situation.
Any other comments that come to mind of lessons learned that would be helpful?
I would just say that it's okay to admit you're overspending in the cloud. Everyone is. It's just the degree to which you're overspending. Okay. Obviously, no one wants to overspend ever, but you're going to have the nature of the cloud allows you such flexibility. All you want to do is do your best to put the visibility and the expertise in place to try and keep it to a minimum. And once you get it under control, do your best to put guardrails up so that you keep it under control.
Great. Well, thank you guys for sharing all of your experience with us and making all of us better off for that. So with that, we're going to conclude this session, but thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Have a great afternoon.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
Hope you heard a few things that triggered some new thinking for you. We do these conversations on IT topics weekly, so please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you get updates on new content, as well as you can post comments and, more importantly, suggest topics that you'd like us to address. You can see that we have some pretty amazing resources. So please let us know how we can help you on your upcoming digital transformation and enterprise IT projects. Thanks very much. Until next time.